Here we are. Can you feel yourself standing here? Can you feel the distance between your body and the bodies around you? The distance between your body and the body to your left. The distance between your body and the body behind you. The distance between your body and the body of the table. The space between the table and the chair. The distance between the chair and your body. Sometimes the body cries, I'm here, here I am. I'm not so different to the things around me. I'm not so different, the things around me.
have this written down for you guys so you don't have to bother writing it down. The starting point was I had a hunch that there was something about me that was not so different from the things around me. So that's where it began, this feeling that there was something there. To experience this, I had to start small so I could handle both conceptually and experientially working with a part of my body rather than the body as a whole. So it was difficult for me to just go straight into my whole body as an object, and I felt that actually I needed to just segment a part of me and use that as an object. And so I worked with my right forearm as dead weight, using a table surface as my platform. So I found that the weight of the forearm was supported on the table, and that made it a lot easier for me to treat it as an object. So I was also using other smaller objects on the table. And what I noticed through that experimentation was that it was subject to the same laws as other objects were. So it was subject to gravity, it had weight, it could be moved, it had the push and pull effect. So if you pushed it, it moved, if you pulled it, it moved. So it had the similar reactions and interactions with the world, with other objects. When I was improvising and experimenting on the table, I examined the spatial relations between objects. That was part of the process, and how I could create spatial relations between the rose bush, the pebbles, and the forearm. Because through my exploration, I found that things were affected by spatial relations. Objects were affected by spatial relations if something tried to be in the space of something else and moved it. Basically, what that means. As time went on, aesthetically and phenomenologically, I began to feel bound by the table as being a platform for spatial relations between objects. So I was in this beautiful studio space, and I was just stuck to this table. And I wanted to move away from the table, but could not yet conceive how to portray the whole body as an object. Considerably late on in the process, like in week 7 or so, I was able to eventually disregard all the small objects from the table that I was working with before. And I was able to start to view the table and the chair as objects themselves. Before they were just functional. I was sitting on the chair using the table as my platform. I experimented manipulating parts of my body in the space, so I was still on the idea of the body as being split up in parts, and I was using either my arm as the dead weight, or my leg, or my head, or my rib cage. I was still trying to express the body as object through parts of the body. It was still too hard for me to think I could do it as a whole. The sensations I experienced were interesting. The freedom in the joints, the weight of the bones, the natural articulation of the structure that was my body. But two things remained unsolved. Firstly, the sensations I was experiencing were considerably more interesting to feel and to watch. Secondly, I was still handling the body as a collection of parts and not as a whole body. So it was my intention to portray the body, capital B, as object, not simply part of the body as object. My readings, particularly in Merleau-Ponty, who spoke on the body being in the world and inhabiting space and time, helped guide my exploration of this new relationship to whole body as object. Working with larger objects of a table and a chair helped me regard as my own body in a larger context. I was now able to explore the multifaceted objects by moving around them. I became aware of the multifaceted existence of my own body. I began to explore how I was able to communicate my experience of body as object through the perception of spatial relations between objects. The piece grew into a series of images, each of which were held within a specific time frame in order to leave an impression on the perceiver's eye. The intention was to offer the perceiver a phenomenological experience of space and to present a clear parallel between object and body. The physicality of the three objects was made evident by the clarity and simplicity of the forms. I discovered that my movement needed to be functional, my expression neutral, and the atmosphere cold. This created a sense of simplicity which allowed for the objects to speak for themselves. In the piece, we observe a table, a chair, and a body as forms, objects, physical entities inhabiting the space together. So that's what the piece is about and how it changed. Any questions? Could I please take questions? Open to the floor, your turn.
Thinking about the simplicity of your objects, Natalie, and your desire for a wholeness to the idea of the body with a capital B, what status then your head and hair?
I knew you would ask that question, that's great. That's one thing I didn't write about. So, while I was doing this exploration, there were snippets of moments that kept coming up to me, which were sort of like, there's something about you which isn't similar to these objects, there's something about you which isn't similar. And that's a huge exploration, and that is going to possibly happen later about the part of me which is dissimilar to objects. But I did want to interweave those moments of the humanity of my physical body in contrast to these inanimate objects. So I don't know if you noticed, but there were moments where the form of my body took more human-like positions. So those were snippets of or is that all I am, which wasn't going to be answered or deeply explored, but a sense of, yes, I'm a physical body, I'm a physical form, but maybe something else too. So I think, the hair and the face, I'd come into that, but the neutrality of the face was a big part of it. I didn't want to have this expression thing going on. I wanted to try and keep the emotion part down.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your theatrical and those kind of choices? Object as event, perhaps. Talk to me about why you started off with us, left us, and then didn't rejoin us.
What do you mean by object as event?
If we are witnessing your research as something towards a performed activity, a performed event, we then are presumably engaged with looking at an object or a series of objects, and those series of objects then are performing those colours.
Okay, good question. So that was part of the idea, which ties in with the beginning and the voice coming in as well. The idea was that I would lead the audience through a guided experience, basically, of their own body as an object. And that's one reason why I was amongst them as well, because I was part of the group of bodies around me and around each other, which were like objects. And then I, which is just one of any of the bodies who could have walked into the space and been compared to these objects, separated and came in to be like, could have been anyone. Just been like that one of these bodies from this space is now moving and it's coming into this space and it's part of these objects, and it's actually just like your bodies. Does that answer the question, or is there something more specific you're looking at?
Well, clearly you are in costume, inverted commas, so immediately identifiable that there is an alien amongst us, and we kind of expect therefore that alien to join the other objects that are presented to us. So how do you expect us to think about us whilst we are not that transformed object?
Because at the beginning, the instructions with the voice are giving you an invitation to experience your body as object. So I was hoping that as an audience member, you would take those instructions and be in an experiential mode where you're already spacing out the area, comparing your body with the body of the table, the distance between it, and following through with the voiceover.
But can I just challenge you a little bit on that? Because I'm probably wrong, because I don't really remember entirely the text, but my focus was on notions of distance, not object. It was between X and Y, so distance was the key thing, and in fact I think was the word that was used almost all the time. check about the distance between table and chair, distance between body and mixed body.
But the distance was between objects, so the word distance was used in order to emphasize the objects in the space. So it began with the distance between. Can you feel yourself standing here? Can you feel the distance between your body and the bodies around you? So it was the idea to bring your attention into your body and feel your body as an object. Feel how your body occupies space in relation to other bodies in space. And then that was taken in to feel the body on your left, the body on your right, and then the distance between your body and space. So although the word distance was used, the reason that it was used was to draw attention to the dimensions in space. By that I mean the points in space where the objects were placed. Does that make sense?
Well, I hear you. I remain slightly unconvinced. And then, can I go on with it?
Yeah. Yes, please.
and then what I'm interested in is in your presentation. At some point, you decided that actually your phenomenological process of objectification of self. Not sure I really mean that, but anyway. You then came up with a brilliant notion that actually this wasn't terribly interesting to watch. Let me go on and just a second. And from me then thinking about the voiceover in relationship to distance, and then seeing how you then related to objects, which was almost always midpoint in between. So that means we have 5 minutes left. The distance between, then the distance shifted in my mind to a performer non-performing, so that I moved from ideas about space to ideas about time. How long was performer objects going to be stationary? And I think there's always this terrible problem of audience-performer expectation, in that if we're waiting, what are we waiting for? Or are we waiting for you, or are you waiting for us? You know, and then it becomes a distraction.
I see the question.
That wasn't a question at all.
The statement. I see the statement on which I will comment. So, yeah, the waiting. This is all part of an experience. The waiting is part of an experience. So if you're open to the experience, I wanted to offer the audience this texture of time. I didn't want it to be like, oh, we're waiting, what's going to happen, what's happening next. But I wanted there to be an experience of space and time in the audience, in the perceiver, and also time. The timing frame thing was so closely linked to this spatial relation thing, and I felt like I could express the spatial relation by using different time frames. Do you know what I mean? That's why timing is so important in the whole thing. Yeah, one thing I may want to add, but the instructions for when you guys came in were, could you stand within the area? That's why we were all meant to be standing. That's why I was meant to be at the back and you weren't meant to be seeing me. But it doesn't matter. It changed. Yeah.
I just have one thought or question really about whether you explored it or whether it's a possibility, but the notion of an object as inanimate, and you also played with the sort of inanimate still image. And I wondered, is there no way of exploring the notion of object but in a more animated way? Or did you ever explore that notion?
That the object is animate.
And you become animate, even though you're still exploring the notion of object. Because you kind of become object, but can we see you as object even if you're Not in stillness.
Even if I'm not in stillness. Yeah. That was the point, because I was not in stillness all the time.
Yeah, but I think I meant in terms of actually.
Or if I was moving.
You saw a series
if I
of
was
still
actually
images
moving
and then
back.
you walked between still images. I
see.
wondered if you'd ever explored. I mean, you did explore it with the arm. I just wondered if that's something that is potential for you.
Well, I like the. I mean, there were sections where I was playing with how we could affect each other. I mean, obviously, it's quite difficult to be physically affected by something like a table, but when I drop my weight on the table, that was one of the examples of how I can release my weight into the table and be affected by gravity through the table. And then I did that in reverse by going underneath it, and then I lifted it up. And it was the same idea with the chair when I was lifting the chair. So I was,
Yeah.
you really.
Yeah, sort of touched on it.
There was a sense of that. There was a sense of these things can't move unless I move them, whereas I can move. And that was also one of the snippets that kept coming back to me of my humanity with it amongst these things. The fact that I was actually something which touched something, and then the touch resonated when I left. Like, disappeared in my hand. And all these things. And that's why I had these snippets of like these positions, like these really human positions, and then like sitting on the chair, because I wanted it to be like, snippets of there is really humanity in there. It was not just pure object. Although I wanted that to be the main thing. I wanted to just give a sense of something maybe more. But I'm not such a question.
But actually, for me, the moment of kind of luxury, in a sense, was when you actually picked the chair up. There was a clearly animated object animating another object.
Yeah.
I kind of thought you sort of threw it away a little bit, but for perfectly valid reasons. And it's also probably significant that almost all, in fact, I think every time I heard the camera click, it was quite clearly a pose. There was no question of there being a transition between static image to static image. And of course the camera, hearing the shutter, however electronic it is, freezes motion, objectifies it all the time.
Yeah.
And there was an objectification of an object in an objective scenario.
Oh, so you mean it added to it?
It drew attention to it.
Not quite about objects, so maybe that's a good idea.
But then it maybe needed to be a soundtrack.
Soundtrack of someone taking pictures. What you haven't noticed yet is that the soundtrack has stopped. Now we're listening to 20 minutes of silence. Isn't that interesting? Because initially when I did it, there was this like sound, and it just stopped, and the whole space just lost everything.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.